In 1982, Ray Dalio he was so broke he couldn't even afford a plane ticket to Texas.
Right.
He actually had to beg his dad for a $4,000 loan just to keep the lights on and, feed his family.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
It really is, because he had just publicly, spectacularly failed on a global stage. Yet, the exact mechanics of how he processed that humiliation, that's what built the world's largest hedge fund.
It completely shatters the myth of the flawless visionary, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
I mean, we tend to assume that people who build massive empires just have a better crystal ball than the rest of us. But Dalio's realization was the exact opposite. He recognized that his crystal ball was cracked.
Right.
His brain was fundamentally flawed, and he needed to build a machine to protect himself from his own ego.
Welcome to a custom deep dive into the raw, unvarnished source material behind Ray Dalio's principles.
And we are bypassing the standard business platitudes today.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at the actual mechanics of his systems. I mean, think about the last time you, and I'm talking to you listening right now, were dead wrong about a major decision at work.
It happens to all of us.
Right. But did you write down the exact algorithmic steps of why you were wrong?
Probably not.
Because that is the foundational premise we are exploring today. Dalio insists that whatever success he achieved had very little to do with what he knew.
Yeah, in fact, he calls himself a dumb shit.
He does. He literally says that.
He does. He says his success was all about knowing how to deal with what he didn't know, which, requires a level of biological self-awareness that most of us actively avoid.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. To understand how someone builds a multi-billion-dollar culture that practically worships mistakes, you have to look at the raw materials he started with.
Right.
You have to look at a kid who was told he was a failure by the traditional system.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's talk about that kid in Long Island in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, ordinary middle-class kid.
Right, but he had a terrible rote memory. Like, if a teacher told him to memorize facts without explaining the underlying mechanics, his brain just rejected it.
He hated school.
He absolutely hated it. But that wasn't laziness, was it?
No, not at all.
It was more like a complete refusal to engage with anything that didn't have a clear cause and effect relationship to a real-world outcome.
Exactly. That is the defining trait of his early wiring. His curiosity was intense, but it only activated when he had skin in the game.
What mattered to him.
Right. That's why, starting at age 8, he was out shoveling snow, bussing tables, caddying at a local golf course. Earning his own money was a tangible outcome.
Yeah.
And that caddying job is actually the catalyst for everything that follows.
Because it put him right next to Wall Street investors.
Exactly. He's carrying golf clubs for these guys during the highly optimistic aspirational psychology of the 1960s.
The JFK era.
Yes. Everyone thinks the economy is perfectly managed, poverty is going to be eliminated, and the stock market only goes up.
So 12-year-old Dalio takes his caddying money and decides, hey, I'm going to buy stock.
As a 12-year-old?
Right. But his methodology is just hilarious. He buys shares of Northeast Airlines for literally one reason.
It was cheap.
It was the only stock he'd heard of selling for under $5 a share.
Uh-huh.
In his 12-year-old mind, he's like, more shares equal more money.
Which is a completely flawed premise.
Oh, completely.
It makes absolutely no logical sense in finance.
Okay, but here's the dangerous part. He gets wildly lucky. The airline's about to go bankrupt, right?
Yep, they were going under.
But then it gets acquired at the last minute, and he triples his money. It's like he walks into a casino for the first time, puts a quarter in a slot machine, and hits the jackpot.
That's a perfect analogy.
But isn't early unearned success actually a terrible teacher? Does this just teach him that making money was easy?
This raises an important question. Because, yes, it's a catastrophic lesson. That specific overconfidence planted a time bomb that would explode on him 20 years later. But we also have to recognize the secondary effect, which is that it addicted him to the game.
He got hooked.
He got totally hooked. He started clipping coupons from Fortune magazine to order free corporate annual reports.
Like, he's a teenager reading annual reports.
Oh, yes. He started building mental models. He was setting himself up for a massive collision with reality down the road, but he was also gathering the data he would need to survive that collision.
And that collision happens in August 1971, which completely alters his worldview.
August 15th, to be exact.
Right. President Nixon goes on television and unilaterally takes the U.S. off the gold standard. So the dollar is no longer backed by gold. The global monetary system is effectively broken.
It's chaos.
Total chaos. Dalio hears this announcement, assumes money as we know it is over, and he walks onto the floor of the New York Stock Exchange the next morning, bracing for an apocalyptic market crash.
And he is totally blindsided.
Right, because the stock market doesn't crash.
No, it jumps almost 4%. The Dow Jones has one of its best days ever.
Wait, how does a global currency crisis cause the stock market to surge?
Well, this is the ultimate aha moment for Dalio. It's the moment he realizes the unprecedented present is usually just a repeat of a forgotten past.
What do you mean by that?
So he spent that entire summer locked away, studying past currency devaluations going back decades and centuries. And he realized the mechanics are actually quite simple.
Okay.
When a country braces its currencies linked to gold, it can print more money. That sudden influx of new money devalues the currency.
Right, inflation.
Exactly, which means the nominal price of everything else, including stocks, has to go up to compensate.
It's just a mathematical balancing act?
It is, and the profound lesson he extracts is that everything is another one of those.
Another one of those. I love that phrase.
Yeah, the crisis he thought was a unique, end-of-the-world event had happened many times before in history for very logical cause and effect reasons. If you can identify the pattern, you can build a machine to navigate it.
And this is where we start seeing the foundation of his famous machine concept.
Oh, yeah, this is crucial.
He starts modeling commodity markets, right? Like livestock and grain. But he's not just looking at price charts.
No, he's mapping the entire biological and economic ecosystem.
Yeah, he takes rainfall data to figure out how it affects corn yields. Then he looks at how corn competes with soybeans for acreage.
It's so detailed.
Then he calculates how much corn livestock eat and how fast chickens and hogs gain weight based on that specific diet. He uses a pocket calculator and colored pencils to project the exact timing and tonnage of meat that will hit supermarket counters months in advance.
I mean, he is building predictive algorithms before he even has access to a real computer.
That's incredible.
He's treating the economy as a complex machine with interconnected parts.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. I get the brilliance of the math, but viewing human economies entirely as machines, it feels a bit clinical.
You think?
Yeah. Where's
Okay.
the human element? It sounds like he's treating farmers and consumers like mindless cogs reacting to rainfall.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the machine concept doesn't ignore the human element at all. It actually seeks to decode it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Dalio realized that traditional economists were failing because they only measured supply and demand as abstract quantities. They just looked at a widget sold.
Okay.
Dalio looked at demand as the amount of actual cash spent, and he obsessed over who the buyers and sellers were and why they were transacting.
So he's looking at the motives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He studied the profit margins of the meat packers, the psychological incentives of the farmers, the consumer preferences shifting at the grocery store. By mapping the psychology of the people inside the machine, he could spot massive imbalances that academic economists were totally blind to.
And he clearly understood human unpredictability, considering his own behavior at the time.
Oh man, his wild side.
Yeah. This is a guy who, while working as a broker at Shearson, paid a stripper to drop her cloak during a presentation at the California Grain and Feed Association convention.
Just unbelievable.
And then he literally punched his boss in the face.
He really did. It sounds absurd, especially when you think of the highly structured, disciplined culture he builds later.
Right.
But it illustrates a critical point. Dalio was driven by intense, aggressive, almost feral energy. He was a force of nature who refused to conform to standard corporate governance.
It's astonishing that anyone would still do business with him after that.
Well, his models were that good.
Yeah, they were so accurate and his insights were so valuable that clients kept paying him for advice even after he was fired. That is the leverage that allowed him to start Bridgewater in 1975 from his two-bedroom apartment.
He had a massive edge because his models were working.
Yeah.
But remember that time bomb of overconfidence we talked about from his childhood?
The slot machine effect.
Yes, the belief that his gut was inherently right. The machine he built was only as good as the assumptions he fed into it, and his ego was about to feed it a fatal error.
Which brings us to the abyss.
It was a big crash.
Between 1979 and 1982, his models indicated that American banks had lent more money to emerging market countries than those countries could ever pay back.
He predicted a massive debt crisis.
A crisis that would trigger a global economic depression. And he was so confident, he actually testified before Congress about it.
He went all in.
He positioned all of Bridgewater's trades to profit from a market collapse.
And he was half right, which, by the way, is the most dangerous kind of wrong.
Yeah.
The debt crisis happened exactly as he predicted. Mexico defaulted in August 1982, but the economic depression, it didn't happen.
Because central banks aggressively intervened?
Exactly. They printed money and flooded the system with liquidity. The stock market didn't crash. It ignited one of the greatest bull runs in history.
Because he forgot the lesson of 1971. The government manipulated the money supply to change the outcome, and he was caught on the wrong side of the trade.
His aggressive positioning wiped him out completely.
He had to fire everyone.
He lost the company, he lost his capital, and he suffered immense public humiliation.
This is the moment where most people tap out. Imagine you, the listener, have to cross a deadly jungle to get to a terrific life.
That's his metaphor, right?
Yeah, the dangerous jungle. On your side, you're safe, but you're just scraping by. Across the jungle is an incredible life of profound success. He tried to cross, got mauled by a tiger, and dragged himself back to the safe side.
Barely alive.
He could have just put on a tie, taken a high-paying Wall Street job, and stayed on the safe side forever. How does someone process that level of trauma and decide to walk back into the jungle?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's because he didn't walk back in with the same map.
Wow.
He realized his own brain was a flawed guide. The pain of that failure forced a fundamental biological shift in how he processed reality.
He had to change.
He describes it as shifting from the mindset of, I know I'm right, to, how do I know I'm right?
That is a huge shift.
It's the birth of what he calls radical open-mindedness. He developed a profound, healthy fear of being wrong. He sought out the smartest people who vehemently disagreed with him just to stress test his logic. He was seeking the holy grail of high returns with low risk.
So he still had those audacious goals, but now he had a mechanism to protect him from his own aggression.
Precisely. He didn't want yes men. He wanted independent thinkers to poke holes in his theories.
And this brings us to his life principles, specifically his 5-step process for getting what you want out of life.
Right, which is highly systematic.
Very. Step 1 is having clear goals. Step 2 is identifying the problems that stand in your way.
And step 3, which is where most people fail, is accurately diagnosing those problems to get at their root causes.
Yeah, diagnosing is tough.
It requires honesty. Step 4 is designing a plan to get around them, and step 5 is executing. Dalio realized the root cause of his 1982 failure wasn't the market.
It was his own ego.
Exactly.
So if human brains are flawed and prone to ego, how do you prevent yourself from slipping back into arrogance when you start succeeding again? Dalio decided you can't just rely on good intentions.
No, you have to systemize your humility.
You have to systemize it. He started writing down his decision-making criteria for every single trait, a strict algorithm.
Like, if A happens under B conditions, then I do C.
Yes. And he turned those written rules into computer code. By running his own biological brain alongside the computer, he could backtest his logic against decades of historical data in seconds.
Because the computer didn't care if it was wrong.
Right. It had no ego. It just processed the reality of the data.
But it's one thing to apply algorithms to soybean futures. It's an entirely different beast to apply algorithms to human beings.
Totally.
But that is exactly what he did as Bridgewater grew. He created a management system called an idea meritocracy.
Okay, let's break that down, because it's built on 3 pillars. Right?
Yeah, radical truth, radical transparency, and believability-weighted decision-making.
So what does this all mean? They sound great in a corporate brochure, but terrifying in practice.
Oh, they are terrifying for a lot of people.
I mean, radical truth means zero filtering of thoughts. You do not hide criticism. Radical transparency means almost everyone can see almost everything. Salaries, performance reviews.
Yeah.
They even tape record every single meeting, so there's no behind closed doors politicking.
Every single meeting is recorded.
But I have to push back here. If you record every meeting and constantly expose everyone's weaknesses, doesn't that just create a paranoid, toxic dystopia?
It sounds like it would.
How do you actually get a project done if everyone is constantly disagreeing and grading each other's flaws? Doesn't the human element just break under that pressure?
Well, it absolutely breaks people who aren't wired for it. Dalio openly admits it takes about 18 months for new employees to adapt to this.
Wow, a year and a half.
And many don't make it. To understand why it works for those who stay, we have to look at the biology of the brain, what Dalio calls the 2 U's.
The upper-level logical brain versus the lower-level emotional brain.
Exactly. Let's use a concrete office scenario. Imagine you are in a Monday morning strategy meeting. The CEO announces a new product launch. You, a junior analyst, think the strategy is fundamentally flawed and based on bad data.
Okay.
In a normal company, your lower-level brain, your amygdala, tells you to stay quiet to protect your social standing. You manage your image.
Right. You do the exhausting second job of corporate America.
Yeah.
Pretending you agree so you don't get fired.
But at Bridgewater, using a tool they created called the dot collector, you literally use an iPad to grade the CEO's logic in real time during the meeting.
While he's talking.
While he's talking, you give him a 3 out of 10 on strategic thinking. Now, the CEO's amygdala immediately registers that low score as a primal threat. It triggers a fight-or-flight response.
Sure, the lawyer wants to attack the critic.
But the culture demands that the CEO's prefrontal cortex, the logical upper level, you step in and say, wait, this isn't an attack, this is data. Let's explore why this analyst sees a flaw I don't.
And that ties into the third pillar, believability-weighted decision-making.
Yes.
Because not all opinions are equal. It's a democracy of ideas, but it's not a democracy of votes. The algorithm tracks everyone's historical track record.
So if the CEO has a proven history of bad product launches,
And the junior analyst has a highly believable track record in data analysis, the algorithm physically weights the analyst's opinion more heavily than the CEO's.
it mathematically removes the boss's ego from the equation. It forces the company to manage itself like a machine designed to achieve a goal, where the who is ultimately less important than the what.
That is just fascinating. The text compares Dalio to a shaper, someone like a Steve Jobs, who can visualize things that don't exist and force them into reality.
Yeah, that comparison comes up.
But where Jobs shaped products like the iPhone through autocratic control, Dalio shaped a culture. His ultimate product was a self-correcting organism where the best ideas naturally rise to the surface, regardless of hierarchy.
And as we move into the final phase of the timeline covered in these sources, from 2011 to 2015, we see a shift in his mission.
Right.
He realizes he has crossed the jungle, he has found the holy grail of investing, and the final step of the hero's journey is returning the boon, passing these principles on.
Passing them on to you, the listener. Because his ultimate message isn't really about hedge funds, is it?
Not at all. It's about how you perceive reality.
Success isn't about avoiding mistakes. Avoiding mistakes is statistically impossible. Success is entirely about failing well.
Failing well means experiencing painful failures that provide massive learnings without feeling so badly that you get knocked out of the game entirely.
Right.
You have to treat your life as a puzzle. Every time you face a painful outcome, you pause, step back, and extract a principle. You build a recipe to navigate around that specific weakness next time.
You are a machine operating within a universe of larger machines. If you don't like the outcomes your machine is producing, you cannot blame the universe.
No, you can't.
You have to open the hood, look at your own wiring, and change the design.
Exactly.
We started this deep dive exploring the myth of the straight line to success. Dalio proves that the line is incredibly messy. It's full of wild arrogance, devastating crashes, and biological resistance.
But by forcing radical transparency onto his own life, he built an engine for continuous evolution.
Which leaves us with a challenge for you to take into your own life today. Think about your single biggest, most painful professional failure from the past year.
The one that still makes your amygdala flare up when you think about it.
Yeah, that one. If you were to take the raw mechanics of that failure and turn it into a strict, unemotional algorithm, a clear if A, then B rule to prevent it from ever happening again, what exactly would that rule be?
That's a tough question.
It is. And more importantly, are you brave enough to walk into your office tomorrow morning and share both the failure and the new rule with the people you work with?